This is a broadcast for the Beneath the Surface Facebook group. I'm Jen Kiaba, and today I have with me Samantha Goss from Sleeping Awake Photography. She is a fine art photographer and a curator, and so today we're going to be talking about her journey from artist to curator, what she has learned from this experience, and then what the rest of us as artists can take away from it. So feel free to comment, ask questions throughout the broadcast. We're going to try to go about 30 minutes, but if there's lots of questions, we might be able to go a little longer depending on Samantha's time. So we're going to get started. The first question that I have for you, Samantha, is how did you first get started in your fine art photography journey?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. So when it came to photography, it was kind of something that I don't want to say fell into, because I kind of always have done photography. Mm-hmm. So as a kid, I would sneak my parents like Polaroid cameras, and eventually it turned into a webcam, like the ones that you could literally take off and move around and stuff like that. So I've always kind of taken photos, and it eventually turned into, I think I was about 12 or 13 when it turned into more self-expression.
And it's a good age for it.
Yeah. Definitely helped a lot.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So I mean, that's pretty much the definition of fine art, is expressing, like creating something that's specifically for the sole purpose of, not just aesthetic reasons, but trying to provoke some kind of emotion out of someone. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I just kind of fell into it. It just kind of happened naturally, I guess, for me. I didn't go from I'm doing these photos to I want to start doing fine art. It would just kind of happen.
Cool. And so can you talk a little bit about your evolution then from when you started until now? Because I think all of us as fine art photographers, we start in a place where maybe it's very difficult for us to really bring our voice to the canvas, so to speak. And it evolves over time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely let me know if I'm not answering a question 100%. I have sometimes I don't understand questions.
No, it's the way I should. I'm just diving deeper, that's all.
Okay, that's fine. So you're wanting me to kind of explain how I got more into the self-expression,
so now we talked about you and like coming into like the beginning of creativity when you were 12 or 13, and there's definitely like 12 or 13s here, and now you're here.
Oh, now, yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so like, how did you get there?
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah. So I would always kind of keep it hidden. I was really personal with everything. I did it because I wanted to, and like I said, express myself. And I did post it like on MySpace when that was a thing.
I remember those days, yeah.
MySpace and Xanga.
Oh my God, Xanga. I remember those days too.
Yeah. So I used to post on there, and I used to be very private about stuff, so I would never have like my actual self. I would just do random photos at first of like composites and everything. So it would be like other people's stock photos, and I would just learn from it.
Yeah.
And I started that around 12 or 13 years old. And then I started getting into doing more self-portraits around that time, just because I was 12 and 13. I didn't know any models. I don't know who would have, modeled for me. And I was easy and convenient, and I could do it whenever I wanted to. So
that's why I still do self-portraits.
But so between 13 and I would say 17, when I graduated high school, that time I kind of went back and forth between doing photography and drawing, because I started drawing before, I guess you could say, I started doing photography more.
Same here, definitely.
Not professionally, but more as a hobby instead of just playing around. So not too much happened between those times, honestly, because I was just kind of wandering around at school, just trying to get through school, I guess. I didn't really want to be there, but
I can relate to that.
So so kind of after that, I originally went into college to be a mortician, and and that year, 2009, was like a big boom of people wanting to be in the medical field. So the wait lines and everything were crazy. And I ended up going into photography as a major because, first of all, I didn't even know that was a real thing. Like, no one told me you could major in photography or do anything. Yeah.
Wow.
At my school, it was either music or like some kind of medical thing. And that was really, really big. And my parents, mainly my dad, really emphasized doing medical of some kind. So anyways, I think that's when I started to really flourish because I kind of allowed myself to be weird and be okay with it. And I did find some people that were okay with it too. So I think that's what really helped me with that, transitioning into being more open about it. But probably between 19 and I'm 27 now. So I don't know. There's just so much that has happened, and I don't really know.
How do you sum it up into sentences? Yeah, I can totally relate.
I don't know. So it's just one of those things where when you are really passionate about something and you really put the extra effort into something, it starts to build on itself. So I mean, if you're lazy and you don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. But if you really put yourself out there and go to, try to make friends, go to conventions or whatever, which at that time I couldn't afford it. So I just kind of had to find people online. So Facebook was where I ended up finding like my fine art family and everything. But yeah, man, like I said, it's so much that has happened. It's just a matter of building up on every single thing that you've worked for. So yeah, it's a lot.
So then let's transition from, because there is like so much. Let's transition into what was that first introduction for you in terms of being in a gallery show, because I think that for a lot of us that is a goal, and it is something that has to build on other things like building a body of work and developing your voice, which you kind of touched on in the last question. So yeah, I mean, before you had ever been in a gallery show, what was kind of like your first introduction into that world?
So the school that I went to actually had a fine arts competition every year. So all of the, I went to a private Christian school. So all of the Christian schools had their own little fine arts thing. And I would always enter like the drawing portion, and I didn't start entering the photography portion until like my senior year in high school because I never thought I was good enough.
Wow.
And so that was I wouldn't really call that a gallery as much as it was like, oh hey, I apply for it and just see what happens or something. But I would say that was probably more of an introduction into it because we had to follow very specific directions that actually still apply to a lot of the gallery stuff I do today.
Yeah, that's hugely important.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with high school kids, and there are several gallery shows that we try to get them to apply to every year. And following directions is the most important after having the work that's actually viable for a show. So yeah.
So I would say that was probably like one of the first kind of like gallery things I did. And then after that, it was a college thing. So it was cool.
And then, so again, you kind of touched on this in terms of like following the rules, but what were some of the most important things that you learned from the artist's perspective about being in a show? I know that you posted something on Facebook the other day about like shipping. There are so many things that we don't think about until we're actually faced with being in the gallery itself.
So, like I said before, I used to do like the school shows, so you could hand deliver those, and when you hand deliver, you're pretty much guaranteed nothing's going to happen to your artwork.
Right. Yeah.
So you were mentioning the shipping thing. Recently I decided to ship very small prints. I think the frame size was 11 by 14, or no, like 14 by 18. So they were smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to keep the glass in it, not get acrylic or anything, and they broke on the way. I don't know how. I packaged them so perfectly and still they broke. But the main things that I've learned over the years of showing it in galleries is don't get too upset if you're not accepted into something.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have like this tunnel vision of I want to be in this gallery.
Yeah.
And you just have all your focus on that. And then when you don't get accepted, or if you don't get accepted, it can suck.
It
really did. Yeah, it really did. I think it took me like 5 or 6 rejections in the beginning until I was like, okay, I need to get over this.
So how do you get over that? Because like I know that there have been times where I've had to have a good cry after some rejections, and when it hurts that badly, sometimes you just don't want to do it again. So how did you overcome that?
I think I started to realize that each gallery, they kind of have a guest curator.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not the same person curating shows over and over again. So I kind of came to the realization that there's going to be those people that like my work, and then there's going to be those people that like more traditional photography or something, and I can't really be upset about that.
Yeah.
It's just my work didn't fit with their vision.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, it's just, I don't know, it's just really, I mean, it can still suck, especially when you're wanting to be in the specific one.
Yeah.
Very bad. I know there's this one gallery I tried for years, and I even applied recently and still didn't get accepted. So for like the last 5 years, I've not been accepted into it. And I've tried crazy amounts of different shows, different like themes and everything, and it never worked out. But I think the thing that I've learned the most over the years is definitely that my work has its place, and it's not always every single gallery I apply to in every single scene. And I get that. And especially with this specific shows, they get so many applications, like artist applications and submissions and everything, and it's really hard for them to choose, but they choose usually based on how work flows together.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if my work they liked and was great, but didn't fit in with the overall show, it's not going to get in.
I've been in shows where I felt like my work stuck out like a sore thumb, you know, and even if I was, even if I was happy to be in the show, I was like, my work looks weird here.
There's some people who will do that. They'll just be like, oh, I like this one and this one, and just kind of mash them all together. But a lot of the times they have almost like a story with all the images from different artists and stuff that they like to kind of make work together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
that's good to keep in mind, that sometimes your image just doesn't work in that story, but it's not a rejection of like the quality of your work or anything like that. It's
that's what took me the longest to kind of come to terms with, because I would always kind of second guess. I'd be like, well, maybe my stuff really wasn't as good or whatever, but it's not always about that. So
definitely not always about that. So then how did you transition from being the artist to being the curator?
So I always have really crazy dreams, I guess. I mean, you see all these curators for galleries, typically people who have a long like resume, or they're very, very well known. You don't see too many people that want to doing it, like just want to do it. It's usually people who have really long careers, or at least from what I've noticed it is, or people who are really well known. So I don't know, I've always wanted to curate a show, and you have to be in, from my understanding, you have to be invited to be a curator at a gallery. There's actually a local gallery that they kind of do that. They invite certain people that they want to curate shows. So I don't know. I just kind of really wanted to do it. I was like, I want to make my own show. And so the first show was, funny enough, called Beneath the Surface.
And I love that name, by the way.
I didn't even know that at the time. I didn't know you had a Facebook group called that. I actually had a friend suggest the name because we were trying to come up with different names for the show.
That's so funny.
Because I had 3 reasons for that Orlando show.
Okay. Yeah. So for everybody that's watching, and hi everyone, we're broadcasting in a way that I'm looking at your comments on my phone here, and then I can't see your names over here, so I'm kind of looking back and forth. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the broadcast. So the show Beneath the Surface that Samantha is talking about is an Orlando show. So yeah, love to. Sorry to interrupt.
Continue. Oh, you're good. You're good. Thanks for keeping everyone updated.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I kind of made that show for 3 different purposes. One was I just wanted to curate a show. Like, it was something that I wanted to do. No one was giving me the opportunity. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to make your own opportunities.
And how did you do that? Because I mean, just getting access to a gallery in general, like if I were to do it, I feel like I'd have to go, hey, Sylvia, I would have to go rent a space and get insurance and then find all the artists. So like,
yeah.
How did you just say, I'm going to do it and then do it?
So this goes back to what I was saying. You have to work on top of the things that you've done before. So the gallery space that we showed in was actually, it was the second gallery I was ever in, and it was a group show through one of my friends. She hosted the show. I can't tell you how she got into it. I don't know how she found it or whatever, but I found it through her. And I ended up having a solo show a few years after that at the same place. And so I was like, well, I've been here twice. I know the area. They did change, not owners, but like managers or something.
Like artistic directors or something?
Yeah. So they did change people like that, but I mean, it didn't really matter. You just kind of email and talk to them, propose ideas and everything. And it goes through like a process where they have like a board of people, I guess they talk to, and they can either accept it or reject it. I don't know how they do that because I'm not on it, but that's kind of how that happened. And I didn't have to deal with anything insurance-wise.
Okay.
I don't remember if it was all through their gallery or not. I know most galleries will offer like an insurance thing, so they have it. I just can't remember specifically with this one. But yeah, so for Orlando, yeah, it was 3 things. I wanted to curate my own show. I wanted to show with some of my friends that I probably wouldn't be able to show with often or at all, I guess, just because we don't all apply for the same shows and we don't all get into the same shows. And I also wanted to give an opportunity to newer artists or artists overseas who were wanting to show in America. So those were kind of my three things. 2 of them's pretty selfish, I feel like. But I mean, I really did want to give that opportunity because I have a lot of friends who are amazing photographers, but they don't know how to get into galleries or do anything like that.
Yeah, there's a lot to demystify there for sure.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to give them an opportunity to at least get their feet wet into the world of that, because you've been in galleries and stuff before. So you know it can be expensive.
Yes.
It can be exhausting emotionally, especially with the accepting and rejecting process.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was kind of how I got into curating shows. I kind of had to give myself the opportunity.
Yeah. So it sounds like for anybody that missed or is just joining us, Samantha had relationships that she had made through years of actually going through the process of juried shows. And it sounds like you really made the most of those connections that you had made over the years. And I mean, most of us here, I think, are introverts. So the idea of networking just like makes our skin crawl. We're like, no, why? But
I
it
think,
sounds like that's really what it is about.
yeah, it is. But the thing is, I don't,
Oh no, I
I,
think we lost Samantha.
oh,
We'll hang out here for a second and see if she can rejoin. I'm going to message her really quickly. So Christina says that's really cool to be given an opportunity to potentially be in a gallery where there were those that knew you or were a good photographer. There you are.
oh,
We
I
lost
don't
you
know
for a
what
second.
happened. I
That's
could hear
okay.
you and see you, but I
We
don't know
just
what
lost the
happened.
video. So yeah, I mean that's really fantastic though. Yeah, so I was just sharing this comment here from Christina. Like I said, we can't see your comment, like your name, in the Facebook group for some reason. It's a weird Facebook API thing. But yeah, so definitely. It sounds to me like for those of you that are interested in curating in the future, it is about making relationships with places that have shown your work before and asking for those opportunities. So one thing that you and I were talking about recently, because you're curating a new show, is the proposal process. Can you just touch on that really briefly?
Oh man. Okay. So the one that I put together with you and Tyler Grace,
Mhm.
um, that was crazy.
It
So
was
this,
intense. I did a lot of research to be able to give you the information that you needed. There's not a lot of information out there on how to put together a good gallery proposal.
yeah. Well, luckily this gallery kind of had it laid all out, and when I say laid all out, it was like 5 pages of information. And it turned out to be like a 22-page thing that I completed in the end.
Wow.
So I got really lucky with that, and I feel like that will be really great to kind of use as a template for future
Mhm.
things. But yeah, they had it listed exactly what they wanted, and this goes
Mhm.
back to following directions. When you're in school and the teachers are like, "Did you follow the directions?" My school is really strict about that, so that's kind of something drilled in my head forever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. That one was crazy because with that one we had to have, which I mean, I was like, "Hey, can you do this in like 2 days?"
Yeah. I think I sent you my piece of the proposal at midnight.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And I think that that's all of that paperwork and all of that writing. I know one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time was about writing your artist statement. That can be a huge uphill battle for artists. Just talking about our work, writing about our work, and then when you're asking somebody to fill out 5 pages about their work, for me, I was kind of like, "Is this worth it?" So
Yeah.
yeah, I completely relate to that.
Yeah, it's so with the artist statement thing, I did read that comment, is it worth it? Does it take away from the images or
Yeah, I'm
what
going to
have you?
show this question. We'll
Oh,
jump
yeah.
ahead a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, whoops. You know what? It won't show. So just for everybody, Angie had submitted a question ahead of time since we're touching on it. And she says, my biggest concern is in writing artist statements and bios. I'm a photographer for a reason. It gives me the words that I cannot write. I think a lot of us feel that. And she says, my current body of work is so deeply personal and emotional that I cannot get the words to describe it. It's akin to beating my head on a wall. So if photography and art are so subjective that we apply our own meanings to what I see, why are these statements so important? So we can't answer that obviously for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Every single gallery owner, juror, curator will have a different answer. But for you, Samantha, when you've been curating shows, why has that artist statement been helpful for you?
For me, I don't look, if that's just for me, I don't look at the artist statements. I try to look at something, and if it makes me feel anything, whether it's the correct meaning or not,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm going to try to work it in some way. But the thing that I like about artist statements is that I mean, at any point in time, you can look at the artist statement or you cannot. That's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at an image and you want to know more or kind of what's going on in the artist's head, artist statements can be really great to kind of understand where they're coming from, especially people who don't understand art. There's so many people out there, which I do too. Like, I'll look at something and be like, what?
Yeah. Yes.
And then when you get artist statements, sometimes, especially about a specific piece, it can help you understand something more. And I think trying to put some kind of words, even if it's just a sentence that describes it, can help someone understand or whatever. Because you never know who's going to look at something and be like, I feel something for this, and then read what the artist had in mind, and then completely connect with that image in a whole different way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are times based on my background that I completely relate to what Angie is saying. Sometimes I don't know how to verbally articulate what happened to me and the emotions and the experiences. But sometimes when I read somebody else's experiences, whether it was the same or not, light bulbs go off in my head. I'm like, oh my God, yes, those are the words that I was looking for. And I tend to be a verbal person, but still I have trouble sometimes describing my experience, again, because there's so many emotions tied up in it. So from my perspective, I totally agree with what you're saying. There are times where I find artist statements to be incredibly pretentious too. And so I like, there are some I just read and I'm like, I just can't. But when I find the ones that help me understand the beneath the surface piece of somebody's art, then it makes me interested in you as a person, the artist. And I think the thing that's so important about being an artist is that people not only connect with you because of your work, but they connect with you because of you. And so that's I think the value in an artist statement. Now, whether or not the curator reads it or not, I don't know, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, kind of going back to your first show, and then now this one that you've recently curated, how do you come up with the ideas for a show? So your first one, Beneath the Surface, like that idea that, well, the title was recommended to you by a friend, but does it come to you based on the images that are submitted, or do you have a preconceived idea of what you want the show to be about and then pick images that fit?
Yeah. So the first one, the gallery show, Orlando show, I really wanted people to put what they perceived as their best work into the show. And so I kind of, for that show, I did build a title or theme for the show around that. So, but for the next show, Emote, I put a title down, but I try to keep it as open as possible. So instead of putting something like, I don't know, frogs or something, something very, very specific, I try to keep it, for me personally, I just try to keep it as open as possible so people can apply, because you can say fine art, but there's so much different types of fine art. You can narrow it down without being too narrow. So you can say, I want portraiture, and I want, because in this new show is called Emote, I want something that's going to show emotion. And that could be very broad, I feel like. And I mean, fine art, you already have it right there. It's going to emote some kind of emotion. So, but yeah. So for me, it's just all about trying to keep it specific but broad at the same time, not too.
It sounds to me like the work kind of dictates the final show in a way. It's not like you have almost like a Mad Lib in your head and you're plugging images in, but it's like the images that speak to each other and to the theme kind of get chosen. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. I try to do that just so it leaves more opportunities open for people, I feel like. So.
Yeah. Definitely. So my next question for you is, I want to expand on this a little bit because you touched on it already in terms of the Orlando show. You had a contact, but then the Beneath the Surface show actually went to Paris, and then it's actually in its third venue right now. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did you find these venues? I mean, to me, that's amazing, you know? So if you could speak to that a little bit, I think it would be very interesting and helpful for us.
So I feel like this question is going to give you nothing, but, or this answer, not question. So the first one was through a friend. She just did a lot of research and found a venue who was open to having different shows. And basically you just send your proposal.
Okay.
For the Paris show, I actually had about 2.5 years maybe, I had a curator from Italy contact me. Just for me, it was out of the middle of nowhere. He told me it was not out of the middle of nowhere, but I was like, well, you got to think from my perspective.
For a long time.
I was like, from my perspective, it was. And I'm really a skeptical person. Like, I get really weirded out when people are like, hey, I want you to do this or whatever. I'm like, can I trust you?
Yeah.
And so, I just have this really big thing about, like, this big fear about my artwork being stolen or mass produced or something crazy, and it freaks me out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of members here have touched on that fear too.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Watermarks can be stripped and everything. So yeah, the danger of both digital and the live sphere, as it were.
Yeah. So I contacted a few people he's worked with before, and it's people that, you know, are well known, and they said it was cool. So anyways, I worked with him, and he saw this show that I put together in Orlando. He didn't go to Orlando, but he saw all the photos I posted and everything. And he just wanted to have us at the new show that was at Paris this year. It was this year.
Wow.
So we did that, and then he invited a select few photos from that into another show in Arles. I don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe I said that right.
That is.
It's in France as well.
Okay.
So it just kind of went from there. So those two French shows were from him.
Okay.
But it just goes from making connections.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say before I got like disconnected or whatever, I hate, you were talking about networking, and I kind of hate that word because I just feel like people are using each other for everything, and I'm really big on making like real connections and being friends with people. And the horrible thing is I don't talk to people. Like I pretty much never message people on Facebook. I'm always terrified I'm interrupting them or whatever. So, but I think it's just a lot of, like you said, making connections and kind of like building on that.
I like how you talked about your third goal for curating, and I think to me that's like the ideal definition of networking for those of us that are idealists, which is like helping give other people opportunities, you know, and if there is reciprocation, that's awesome. But I mean, that's kind of like my same intention for having this group, is to give people information and to help them achieve the things that they want to. Like, I'm not as far along as other people in their career, but I'm at a certain point. And so everything that I've learned before that, it's like, let me help you, because this was really hard to get here. And I would love to make it easier for you guys, you know. And I think that I hate the idea of networking in like the corporate sense. I have a background in the corporate world, and it does feel skeezy. But yeah, I do think that there is like that brighter side to it too. Yeah. So then we touched on this a little bit. And by the way, Christina says she has the same fear as you too. So I think a lot of us share that about our work getting stolen.
I pretty much almost never started showing my work because of that.
Really?
It took me, I had a whole portfolio of images, which this is another story, but I dropped my hard drive and lost all my portfolio. This was years ago. Like, I'm completely fine with my stuff now. I have it on like 17 backups. But yeah, I almost didn't show my work because I was so scared it was going to get stolen and everything. And it's just one of those things where you have to get over that fear and realize like it's probably going to happen, unfortunately. But you have to make your name so people know it's your image.
Yeah, that's a really brilliant point. And it's really hard when you're first starting out too, because when I was just starting out, I saw friends on Facebook told me that an Egyptian photographer had stolen some of my images of a client. This was back when I was doing more portraiture. And not only was it terrifying, but like nobody knew who I was. Nobody was going to look at that work and be like, oh, wait, that's Jen's. I mean, my friends did, but that's because they recognized the people in the images. But I know Brooke Shaden has touched on this a little bit too. It's like people recognize her work now. So it becomes more difficult to pass it off as something else.
Exactly.
But those of us that are earlier in our career, it's still a legitimate fear. But to your point, if you don't find a way to overcome that, then you don't give yourself those opportunities to get to the point in your career where somebody takes your image and you're like, all right, whatever, it's not gonna like ruin things for me financially, and people know it's mine. So, to circle back on the shows, once you get to a point where you're okay showing your work and you're submitting it, from your perspective as a curator, what is it that you're looking for in an image, like technical proficiency, narrative, things like that?
For me, I always say I have crazy eyes, and what I mean by that is like I can see everything. Like you can show me an image and I can probably show you a flaw in it, and that sounds really bad, but like no, I mean
no, I totally understand because I see my own work that way, but the idea of a curator looking at my work that way is terrifying. Now I'm never going to show it. Kidding.
I see everything. It's really weird. It's because like the person in me that draws and everything, you have to see everything. I mean, I had one class in college where they literally made us draw glass. So they set up a whole table full of all these different glass items and we had to draw that.
In the program that we do every year, it's called The Impossible Still Life, and it's a lot of reflective pieces and hey Mike, and it's pieces of mirror and things like that, and the whole purpose of it is to not only break down the artist's ego but also to get you to see everything. And it's such a great training exercise, and it's something that I could do every year and still feel like I fail at, you know?
It really is. So I used to focus so much on everything being technically right, everything being completely in focus. And I actually found that took away a lot of my own personal creativity because I'm so focused on these details that with fine art really doesn't matter in a way, I guess. So
hey Judy.
I kind of taken a different approach to the photos that I pick now. I look more on if they express something. And, you know, of course I'm not going to be like, oh, I'll take, you know, I want this piece that is really bad technically. I hate to say it like that, but there are there's people who's growing, and that's fine. And those people who are growing aren't always ready to be in galleries because you have to think of what people want to see and what people want to buy. And, you know, just because you're not there yet doesn't mean you're not going to get there. And that's the thing. Like, I was definitely not there when I was 12. And everything. It just, you have to grow from it. So now I look more on if it's telling a story. And if it's telling a story, is it, you know, do you get something from it? Like, can you understand it easy? I guess is kind of how I look at it. So.
Yeah, interesting. It's so interesting too because a number of group members recently applied for a show. I think it was called Wide Open, and I had intended to apply too, and it just
I did the
totally.
same thing. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. I
Yeah.
completely forgot about it, and I was
Yeah.
so busy. Yeah.
But so a couple of people shared that they didn't get in, and they reached out to Brooke Shaden, who was one of the jurors, and she was kind enough to give feedback. And I mean, the technical proficiency that she was demanding was really high.
Yeah.
It was very impressive and made me kind of happy I didn't submit, and also sad at the same time. But can you talk to me a little bit about if you're willing to give feedback when people submit and don't give in or don't get into the show?
Oh yeah, definitely. I feel like so when you mentioned that, I was just about to say you never get that.
Yeah,
People,
that was huge. Brooke was
yeah.
amazingly wonderful to do that, I think.
Yeah, well, you have to think, especially every gallery gets numerous amounts of submissions, sometimes hundreds, sometimes like a good couple hundred. And it's really hard to give all the people that you unfortunately have to reject feedback. If they contact you, I feel like, that makes the process a little bit easier. They contacted you, you can write them
Right.
back, whereas writing 150 or 200 people back. But yeah, no, I love giving feedback where I can.
Hmm.
Um I mean, I try to give more technical feedback than feedback on the story, the overall story, because I feel like that's such a personal thing.
Yeah,
And
that's really hard.
yeah, I can't be like, oh, this is wrong. But I could also, or I could give them suggestions to make it more um not obvious, but to make it, to convey it a little bit better, I guess. Like
Hmm.
maybe certain props or color toning or something would help the image to convey what they're trying to say is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I talk to my students about is like the history of iconography, because my background is art history,
Hmm.
and so that was something that I loved about paintings is that when you saw a dog in a painting or a lily in a painting, that was a language because
Yeah.
in like the medieval times, people didn't read
Hmm.
necessarily unless you were in the higher classes, and so this was a way to communicate. And so the history of that to me is so fascinating. And sometimes I know that there are members of the group where I'll be like, oh, this dog in your image reminds me of loyalty because iconography. And I do that geek out. But I think that that's a really interesting thing for artists to think about too, is that maybe we don't have to go all the way back to the 1500s, for example, but there
Hmm.
are symbols that we all understand.
Yeah.
A dove in an image, for example, wings, things like that.
Hmm.
That maybe you can find that line between being overt and subtle and expressing that intention through the
Yeah.
symbols and, like you said, the props too, for sure. So my next question for you then is, would you rather, when people are submitting, do you want to see a full body of work or are single images okay? Because when I first started submitting, I would submit totally disjointed images. And then finally, I put together a body of work, which is what I submitted to you recently. But it took me a long time to even get to the point where like I knew how to do that.
Yeah.
So when you're seeing submissions, do you have a preference?
Um, no, not specifically. I feel like for me specifically, I go for what will fit the image, or not the image, but the overall show.
Mhm.
Um, but I do know some galleries, and most of the times they'll be kind of Pacific. Oh my goodness, I can't even talk today. Most of the times they'll be specific about things, so they'll be like, they want a whole series of something, or
Mhm.
it can be whatever. For the show that I put together of you and Tyler, they wanted very specific, uh, like, what am I trying to say, series. Like they wanted
Mhm.
a full body of similar whatever. And
Mhm.
that's kind of really hard for someone like me, because I base every image on that very emotion. So I don't edit all my images similar or the same.
Yeah.
Like I don't have the same tones in every single image. One image could be blue and one could be green, and it could all go for the same series, but they're not going to, the tonality of them won't look the same, I guess. So it's again following directions, because usually they'll pretty much tell you. They're pretty good about that.
So then it sounds to me like your Beneath the Surface show, which went to 3 different places, which is awesome. That was definitely people who were submitting single pieces would be considered. But then for the Emote show, it was definitely more about solid bodies of work and showcasing that for a few artists.
Yeah. Well, so for Emote, that one has more artists than the Orlando show did.
Okay.
And so yeah, they're all single pieces, but I get what you're talking about. Some some of them I've accepted ones who had images that maybe I accepted 2 or 3 of their images, but they all kind of went together.
Yeah.
And I feel like that went well with this show and everything, because I try to give people the opportunity to have more than one piece in a show. I know a lot of places will pretty much only choose one per artist or something, but I try to give people a little bit more opportunity to have different things shown. I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to see like the voice in several pieces.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not doing the curating thing the way most places do it, but I mean, it's art. Why is there so many standards?
That's actually a really good segue into my next question for you, which is, what did curating teach you about gallery shows that you didn't realize as an artist?
Oh man, it's hard. It's a lot harder than you would think, because you have to think of the overall show, and if someone's work doesn't fit, like, can you make it work? I mean, for me, for the Emote show, I really try to give as many people as I could in the opportunity. And so there would be some times where I really liked a piece, but chose a different one instead from the same artist that fit with the show better. You want to have a good flow going around.
Really interesting. Yeah. Sometimes I'm surprised when I submit a number of images, like maybe not the strongest image was picked.
Yeah, it's so weird. I get that all the time too. And I think that we think some of our work is a lot like the most amazing things ever.
We think it's better than it is. Yes, definitely.
So I actually learned that in my solo show, because I had this one piece I kind of like tucked away in a dark corner of the room, and that was the one everyone went to. And I'm like, guys, this one took me like 7 hours to complete. How about looking at this one?
This way, over here.
But so another thing that I didn't realize is, not only is it hard, but it's if you're doing everything yourself, I mean, there's galleries who do everything usually, and the curator just kind of curates the show and that's it. But what I've been doing is I've been putting everything together, from finding the venue, which, to kind of touch on that, how I've been finding venues is you kind of have to look for those venues that are open to having rotating shows. Usually you have galleries that are galleries, like just specifically one gallery. And then you have places that have, I don't know how to describe this. They're just open to proposals all the time and getting different work in there. So I guess you could say there's galleries who do their own thing, and then there's galleries who are, they just accept proposals all the time to just different types of shows, just whichever ones pique their interest, I guess. So finding the venue and finding one that works for the type of art you're wanting to do. I mean, I would never try to shove my work with a place that only does paintings, like very classical paintings and stuff. It's just weird, but putting together, I guess, kind of the rules of everything, because some places don't want you to have like sawtooth hooks, and you have to tell people like, don't do that, don't pack with packing peanuts or something. Or for Orlando, I had all of the artwork shipped to me, and then I hand delivered it to Orlando. And that was the most shipping I've ever done in my entire life.
That sounds like a stressful nightmare to me. Like all of these people's precious work, and you're responsible for getting it intact and then back to them too.
Yeah, and there was definitely stuff that came in broken, and we had to deal with like UPS claims and stuff like that.
Wow.
And then hanging it in Orlando. Luckily, I had a friend, Tim. He came down to Orlando and he helped me hang it. And without him, the show probably wouldn't even have been a show, because he basically did all the hanging for me. And it was definitely a team effort with that. But it's a lot. Like, it's a lot more than you think.
And so a lot of galleries charge a submission fee, whether or not you get into the group show. And did you charge a fee for the Beneath the Surface show in Orlando?
Yeah, so when you find these venues, you don't just, some of them you probably can, but that one specifically, you can't just be like, oh, hey, I want a show here and it's free. You have to rent the space out.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I took the cost of the space and I just divided. I was like, what if I wanted 35 pieces in here or 45 pieces? And I just like divided that up.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was $300 and I divided it up by 45 or whatever, I made that as the submission fee.
Right. And you didn't add on anything for like you're dealing with UPS, you're hand delivering things, your time hanging. So I think a lot of artists, like, they get upset about submission fees. I totally understand that. But at the same time, it's like all the work that you're talking about, like that does go into putting up a show. Another question that just came up, and I don't see the name, I'm sorry, but are there specific specifications for framing your work, or can you personally choose?
That's a really great question, because this just goes with when you try to apply for a gallery, do your research. I mean, always do your research, because you sometimes will try applying for a gallery that doesn't even want photography, or they don't want your type of photography. They only do probably all black and whites, or just traditional pure photography. Mm-hmm. So it's really
straight photography. Research. That's what they like to call it.
So the standard, from what I'm seeing, is most galleries want a plain, simple black frame with a white mat. And it's usually, for group shows, it's usually in a 16 by 20 frame. So if you do square format like I do like 12 by 12s for galleries and stuff like that. But a lot of the times it's just simple black frame, white mat. And then there are some galleries who will let you do whatever. And since I curated the show in Orlando, everyone could have done whatever they wanted. Like, they could have, and I let them. I mean, some people had gold frames, some people had black frames, some people did canvas, and some did acrylic prints and stuff like that. So I allowed them to be I try to let them be as free as possible with that, instead of putting so many things on them all at once, especially if it was their first show. Mm-hmm. But generally simple black frame.
Yeah. So if you're going to work with a framer, because I've done exactly what you're talking about, the 16 by 20, my pictures were either 10 by 10 or 12 by 12, and definitely for 16 by 20, I think 12 by 12 fills the frame better.
It looks,
it does, because I have some 10 by 10s actually like hanging on my wall in the background, and I could probably bring them on camera. You'll see that they don't fill the frame out that well, but I told the framer to bottom weight them so that there was some nice space there. I'm going to pop off camera really quickly and just show everyone.
I'll just stay here and do a little dance.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this far away enough to get all in frame.
Mm-hmm.
So here is exactly what Samantha is talking about. Scooch it more towards me. Wow, yes. My perspective is totally off here because it's like backwards and I'm like, I don't know how to hold this. There we go. So this is a 16 by 20 frame, black, white matte. This is a 10 by 10 print. So what Samantha was talking about, a 12 by 12 would probably fill out the frame a lot nicer. So this is something that you could very easily either have a gallery do if they'll do their own framing or printing for you. And a lot of them will to help bring down the cost. And then this is plexiglass here, I think. So that's a pretty good standard. If you are printing larger or like large rectangles, then it's going to be a little more difficult. And some galleries will have you print smaller specifically so they can fit in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, to kind of touch on what you were saying about galleries printing for you, there's some that will, like they will, they'll print and matte and frame for you. And it's, you know, it's their frames and mats and everything, but they'll print your image, and it's usually a small fee. I mean, there's been a few places it's like, oh, it's like $30 to do all this, or $15, or
but the cost as compared to printing your own, framing your own, shipping your own can be it's a huge cost savings.
It definitely is.
The problem with that, it gets a little complicated because then it's like if it doesn't sell, then they say they'll ship it to you, the print, which I've had that done before so that I have it in my files, or they'll destroy it. It's like, oh, and if it does sell, then it's not limited edition in the sense that it's been run on your specific paper type, because they may not always have the paper that you prefer printing on, and you haven't signed it. So unless it's shipped to you, you sign it, you edition it, and then you ship it to the client. It does complicate things a little bit. So having your prints that are already signed shipped to a gallery and then shipped back to you also is helpful. So it kind of goes both ways in that regard.
Yeah, and I mean they'll tell you if you can do that or not. Most galleries are pretty clear about this stuff. And I know, like you were saying, if you don't have it signed or anything, I know some people will do certificates of so they'll do certificates that they can just ship the person. Me personally, I like to have mine printed out. If I'm going to have them matte and frame it, I'll print it and send them the print. So they can matte and frame.
That's a good idea. Yeah, because then you can kind of do the quality control.
Hello?
I can see you. I can hear you.
Kind of disappeared.
Oh, really? I can see and hear you. Hold on.
I don't know what happened.
They get upset about submission.
Let's see. I can't see any of the comments, I don't think.
I can see you and hear you. That's very weird.
So let me try messaging Jen.
I'll message Samantha. Somehow we got disconnected. Let's see here.
She disappeared.
All right.
Okay, so she says she can see and hear me. That's what happened to me earlier, Jen. So basically what I did is I just clicked out and went back to the link and hit.
All right, I'm going to refresh and see if we can fix it. Can you see me now?
There you are.
Yay. Okay, I refreshed. That must have looked weird for everyone on the other end because I can see me. And somebody says they can see and hear both of us. So one of our connections must have gotten funky. Thank you guys for putting up with our technical difficulties. So we've almost run an hour, and I only asked Samantha for half an hour of her time. So I'm actually going to pull up our last question. No, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. So I want to close on our last question, which is, what is the biggest piece of advice that you have for artists that are looking to be accepted into a gallery show? And if you've touched on it before, then this will just be a reiteration of that advice.
Yeah. Oh man. I think the main advice I can give people that are trying to get into galleries is, do your research. Don't be afraid of rejection. I mean, you never know when you're going to get accepted into one of these galleries. It you could think that you were 100% into something and not be, and then you can think you're not in it at all, and then all your pieces you submitted get accepted.
Yeah.
So just do it. I mean, it's gonna suck the first couple of times that you get rejected, but just keep doing it.
It builds up that thick skin that we all need to have and don't have, I think.
Yeah. And it took me a little bit, but it sucked in the beginning. But after a while, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think what really got me is I applied for like, oh man, 5 or 6 galleries and got accepted into 0 of those all at the same time. So I had like back to back emails of like, nah.
And were all of those ones that had fees for shows, or were these to be like a,
yes.
So that does get expensive.
Yeah, typically if you apply for gallery shows, it's going to be anywhere from $25 to $45. And I've seen even $60 and $10. So it's just whatever the gallery wants to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's just follow directions, really get out of your comfort zone and apply, even if you don't think you're going to get in. It's kind of a good practice to go through the process anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And mainly just research. I mean, I'll sit at the computer for like hours doing research on different galleries, and if my work will fit. Yeah. And even sometimes if my work doesn't fit, I still just try.
I think that's a really good point, though, like making sure that your work that looks like yours or somehow akin has been shown in this gallery before and is a good fit, because the gallery has developed a customer base. And if your work isn't a fit for them, then what ends up happening is that they don't have customers that they know are going to buy the work. Mm-hmm. And that is the end goal of being shown, is to have your work sell.
Yeah. I actually get that question a lot about selling your artwork and money and everything. And I feel like I'm kind of an oddball in this sense, because I'm like, I don't care if my work gets sold. It sounds so weird to say that, but like, I kind of don't care. I just like doing it, and I like having my work travel, I guess.
Right.
And have people see it and have them connect to it in some kind of way. And I think that's what my end goal is to connect with as many people as I can, because I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant goal. For the galleries to keep their lights on, they have to sell the work. But for us as artists, I think to create with the intention of connecting is the thing that'll keep you going, even if you're not selling. Because if you're creating work to sell, and that being your first goal, you're going to burn out so quickly. But if it sells, it's sort of like this bonus.
Yeah, definitely. But that's also what those submission fees are for. For their lights and rent.
I think, that, and also the hanging fees and things like that. And I think that some smaller galleries that don't have the same customer base that a larger gallery does, they do need those submission fees to stay open. And so there are people that feel like it's sort of this, a scam is a strong word, but like it is a cycle to keep non-profitable galleries open. There are like very well-known and respected galleries that will still have open calls and will still charge a submission fee. Like I think Klopching Gallery is one that is very well-known, and also they will charge a submission fee, I think, for like the one time a year that they will do open calls. So I think sometimes that's to pay the curator who is not involved.
I was just about to say that. I think that submission fees are fair, just for the simple fact that like they have to go through so much work and they have to take, the time and consideration. So I think submission fees are fair. When I first started, I didn't think so. I was like, what?
Now that you know what goes into it. So yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Now that I've been on the other side and have literally done everything myself, I don't want to say I lost a lot of money doing the Orlando show. I'd rather say I invested.
There you go. Yeah.
Because I feel like I did. I feel like I've invested in some of my friends' futures and everything. And I love that. I love being able to help them and everything. And I was offered by some people to, for them to pay me some things. And I was like, no, I got this. Now, my friend Tim did help me out a lot. I mean, he got a place in Orlando while we were down there and let me stay, and he didn't charge me anything. So that was great because I was barely making it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's expensive. So submission fees are more fair than you think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway. So is there anything else that you would like to share? Otherwise, I think we do have a few people on that are live who may not have asked some questions. So if anybody has questions that you didn't already ask, feel free to ask before we wrap. And Samantha, if you have any final thoughts, feel free.
I feel like I've talked a lot and not really sure if I answered everything correctly.
I don't think that there's a such thing as correct or not correct. I think that you answered to the best of your abilities based on your experience. And I think that it's been really helpful. Like, there are things that I feel like I learned from our conversation. I'm sure that, a lot of other people have learned as well. One of the comments that just came up is, thank you so much for great advice. I'm checking to see who that was now so that I can actually give you credit for that. Christina, I think that was. I'm trying to reload. We are not the most technical people in the world. I can see. Oh no, that was Judy. Thank you, Judy. So yeah, I think that probably wraps it. Again, we've gone way over the expected time. Samantha, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your advice. No, don't hide. It's been wonderful. So I appreciate your letting us take double the time that we had agreed upon. So if anybody else has questions, after the live broadcast, feel free to comment and, we'll answer. There's another comment here that says, oh, come on, load, please. Christina Christina says, this helps so much. Thanks for being honest. And that encouraged me. I'm really glad that this has provided encouragement as opposed to the opposite. I know that we've shared a lot of fears that artists have in the process. I don't know that we debunked everything. In fact, we might have helped scare more people in terms of work getting stolen. It's a reality that we all face, but I don't think that should hold people back from getting out there, because it is a double-edged sword. If you never get out there, you never make that connection. And that's the thing that I think has been the through line for you, Samantha, in terms of talking about creating and curating. And I think that that's a really beautiful purpose. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me exceed your time limit.
Oh, no, thank you so much. All right, everybody, thank you for your questions. I hope that this has been fun for you guys, and hopefully we'll see more of you guys up here in Samantha's hot seat, sharing your experience and your advice. So we'll end here. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. Bye.